Picking up with barn burning, page 413. So, just to recap very briefly. Abner goes in the house, steps on the rug, smears horse crap on it, stains it. Later on that day, the rug is sent back to him. He's told to clean the tracks out of it. Abner cleans the rug. He removes the tracks, the stain from the rug, but he permanently damages the rug in the process. We're told it looks like a Lilliputian lawnmower went and cut it, so the fibers of the rug are lower where the tracks have been. He returns it that way. Later on, they're back in town because there's a new court, there's a new trial. And we're told, this is on a Saturday, top of page 413. The boy knows this is a trial. He recognizes the justice of the peace, we're told. And in that first long paragraph in 413, it ends with Sardi's description, or narrator takes us into Sardi's mind, of Major Despain and how he appears. And we're told towards the bottom, his face had an expression not of rage. This is Major Despain's. Had an expression not of rage, but of amazed unbelief, which the boy could have not known was at the incredible circumstance of being sued by one of his own tenants. And the boy comes and stands against his father that is next to, and cries out, yells at the justice of the peace. He ain't done it. He ain't burnt. Go back to the wagon. Burnt. To understand this rug was burned too? Notice what the boy almost does. Okay? He almost spills the beans about previous. Okay? The boy's saying he hasn't burned the barn down yet, but he doesn't get that far. Okay? His father says, did anybody claim here it was? That is, that I burned the rug. Get back to the wagon. But the boy doesn't. He just goes to the rear of the room. So, the justice of the peace then addresses Abner. You claim 20 bushels of corn is too high for the damage you did to the rug. Notice that's just a yes or no question. How does Abner respond? He brought the rug to me. He said he wanted the tracks washed out of it. I washed the tracks out and took the rug back to him. Right? That is exactly what happened. That is the quote-unquote God's truth. He did get the tracks out. He ruined the rug in the process. So the justice of the peace says, but you didn't carry the rug back to him in the same condition it was in before you made the tracks on it. And I think I mentioned the other day that at this point, if Abner had a good defense lawyer, what would the lawyer say? But that's not what he asked me to do. He said, remove the tracks. Remove the stains. Here's the rug. Stains are gone. I met the letter of the law. But Abner doesn't reply. Why not? I think two reasons. One, he's not that quick on his feet. That is, he's not intellectually sharp and nimble. He can't, he's not a lawyer. He can't immediately catch on the flaw in the judge's argument. And two, because he knows the judge has him. You decline to answer that, Mr. Snopes? Father doesn't answer. Then I'm going to find against you. The one thing I didn't mention the other day, and it's the reason why I read the little part at the end of that first long paragraph. What's the big difference between this trial and the previous trial? In the previous trial, Mr. Harris was bringing charges against Abner Snopes. In this trial, Abner is charging Major Despain. Okay? With essentially what? The language isn't used. That's why I said it's essentially this. Breach of contract. How so? Major Despain has changed the terms of the contract. The terms of the contract are not exactly spelled out, but it's implied Abner has agreed to work for him for a certain number of months, and at the end of that term of time, he would deliver to Mr. Despain a certain number of bushels of grain, corn, all right? It's not just that he, I had that drawing the other day. It's not just that he farms 99 acres and Major Despain gets all of that and Abner gets one. It's that he farms all this land and he has to produce a certain number of bushels of corn from that. Notice that doesn't account for drought, flooding. So he's got to produce X number of bushels. Now he has to produce an additional 20 bushels of corn. A bushel is like a bucket about this big around at the top, about this big around at the bottom. Fill that with corn, not cob, kernels of corn. Now he's got to produce 20 more of those on top of what his original was. Guess where those 20 are coming out of? The part he got to keep for himself. Okay? Shows a lot of what on his part to bring these charges against the landowner. And the implication is Major Despain is a large landowner. He's very wealthy, which means he's powerful. All right? I'm fighting against you, Mr. Snopes. But then what does the judge do? Okay, at that point, you're guilty or you lose. What does the law, literally, strictly speaking, say? Pay the 20 bushels. You brought these charges. Pay up. Now, at the end of 8 months. But the judge doesn't do that. What does he do? 20 bushels of corn seems a little high for a man in your circumstances. Let's start, yes. Major Despain claims the rug cost $100. October corn will be worth about 50 cents. I figure if Major Despain can stand a $95 loss on something he paid cash for, you can stand a $5 loss. You haven't earned yet. So that 20 bushels of corn would have been worth about 10 bucks, we're told. But the judge is saying, you can't even afford that. In other words, for all the labor he's going to do for 8 months, he can't even afford 10 bucks out of it. So he says, I'm going to cut in half the amount Major Despain is charging you. What has the judge just shown to Abner Snopes? What has he tempered justice with? What's the flip side of justice? Mercy. He's shown him mercy. Judges have what are called sentencing guidelines. You can charge with a crime. They can sentence you to the least amount of time, or they can sentence you to the most amount of time for the particular crime. The judge has taken those guidelines and kind of thrown them out the door. Because the guidelines here would be, pay up. You pay restitution. But he's showing kindness. He's showing compassion. Is Abner aware of that? No. Is Sardi aware of that? Probably not. Okay? So, they make their way back to the wagon. Father buys some oil. They get home, bottom of 414. It's now after sundown when they reach home. They eat supper by lamplight, and the boy sits on the steps of the porch, or on the doorstep, and we're told, watches the night fully accomplish. Meaning, when they arrive home and eat dinner, it's not pitch black yet. It's still twilight. The sun has just gone down. But as the boy sits there, he now watches, and it is fully dark. Okay, we're told it's early to mid-May. Depending on what part of Mississippi they're in, southern part versus northern part, Sunset's going to be 6:30 or 7. By 7:30 or 8, it's dark. Dark. So this is 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And notice, he's listening to the whippoorwills and he's listening to the frogs. What's the image all this conveys? It's peaceful. It's calm. It's like a moment that Sardi can take a deep breath. This is one of those momentary gusts of peace that breaks up the other constant gust, the old fierce pull of blood. Because what happens to that peace in solitude? Abner, no, oh God, oh Abner, no. He's like, oh crap. Again, he goes inside. What do you, go get the oil? And he's moving. Notice we're not told the boy turns and runs. He was moving. It's like there is some force that has now transported him. And he starts heading towards the barn, and he thinks. Well, let me back up. He was moving, running outside the house toward the stable. This, the old habit. Okay. Everything from this, the old habit, to it came to him, is the narrator describing Sardi. It's not the narrator telling us what Sardi is thinking. This is the narrator informing us what is going on, why Sardi is acting the way he is. Again, not giving us Sardi's motivations. It's like the narrator has stepped outside and said, and here's what he's doing, and this is why he is doing it. There's an external force moving on Sardi. This, the old habit, the old blood, which he had not been permitted to choose for himself, which had been bequeathed him willy-nilly, and which had run for so long, and who knew where, battening on what of curt outrage and savagery and lust, before it came to him. What is the this? What is the old habit, the old blood? What's a habit? It's something you do over and over, but you don't think about it. What's the old habit? How many times have they moved in Sardi's 10 years? 12. The implication is this isn't the first time Sardi has been told to go to the barn and get the oil. The old blood. I didn't allude to it in this class. I did my class yesterday. What's the old blood? Not the old pool of blood, the old blood. That's the blood in Sardi's veins. Where did he get that blood from? Both literally and figuratively. His parents. And theirs came from their parents. And theirs came from their parents. Meaning, we all have a bit of our ancestors in us. And if your ancestors are really screwed up, that means you've got some of that screwed upness in you. It's like Abner can't but do this. And then notice, before it came to him. What's the it that comes to him? It's not the habit, it's not the blood. It's something new. I could keep on. Now that sounds like I could keep on doing the same blank we've been doing, but that's not what it means. I could keep on, he thought. I could run on and never look back. Never need to see his face again. That old habit, that old blood, Sardi thinks I could stop it. I could break it. I could escape from it. Only I can't. I can't. Why not? Because that old fierce pull of blood yanks him back. It's like he's getting to the barn and he's starting to go around the barn and something stops him. How old is he again? He's 10. Now, unless his father beats him regularly, for most 10-year-olds, it's kind of hard to turn your back on your parents. Though we're not given any expression of love in this family, so maybe it should be easier. And we're told the rusted can in his hand now, the liquid splashing in it as he ran back towards the house. Notice we're not told when Sardi goes into the barn, opens the door, grabs the can, turns around. It's like just now, suddenly, miraculously, it's in his hand and he's headed back. Why? Because he's not even aware that he's picked it up. Why? Habit. The old blood. The old blood. The thing you do over and over and over and over, even though you may not want to do it. Ain't you even going to send someone? I'm not going to use the word. What's that imply? At least you sent one before. Before when? Well, we know he did with Mr. Harris, because he said, wood and hay can burn. And the implication is the other 11 times he did also. In other words, Abner gave them the proverbial fighting chance. This time? Nope. This time his father doesn't strike him, but he grabs him. Okay? He tells the older brother, pour that into the larger can, I'll catch up. That is, start. Brother says, better tie him up. And notice the brother says, you better tie him up to the bedpost. Why? Because then he can't get loose. The father instead says, hold him. And the aunt moves towards, not you, Lenny, that is, Sardi's mother, Abner's wife. Take hold of him. I want to see you do it. His mother holds him by the wrist. Is that a good hold? No, we're told he's a wiry, scrawny little bugger. 10 years old, he's going to break hold of that handhold quickly. Better hold him better than that. If he gets loose, don't you know what he's going to do? He'll go up yonder. Does he explain everything? No. What's implied? If he goes up yonder, what's going to happen? He'll warn Major Despain. What are a series of possible consequences from Major Despain being warned? I could get caught. Our other son could get caught. Or we could be killed. Either way, what's going to happen to Lenny and her sister Lizzie and the 2 daughters? They'll be left entirely to fend for themselves. Early 1890s, Deep South, they are SOL. Life's been hard for them already, right? It's just going to increase exponentially. His mother says, I'll hold him, so you do it then. And he leaves, and the boy starts to struggle. I don't want to have to hit you. And her sister says, let him go. If he doesn't go, tell him, by God, I will. Why? One, there's no old fierce pull of blood there. Lizzie is no blood relation to Abner. 2, what Abner's doing is wrong, and it needs to stop. And 3, to use the modern phrase, the cycle of violence has to end. His mother, don't you see I can't? Why can't she? Again, no blood relation between Lenny and Sardi. What relation do they have? Husband and wife. And in many respects, a lot stronger than blood. Okay? Sardi, no, help me, Lizzie. And the boy's free. And he starts running. He gets to the house, bangs on the door. Servant opens it. Sardi steps in and he sees the old white man come out of the doorway in the hallway. And he yells, "Barn! Barn!" "What? Barn?" "Yes, barn." Why doesn't he say anything else? Why just one word? Well, one, it gets the point across. Two, he's probably out of breath. Okay. Major Despain says, "Get my horse." Sardi started running back down the drive. He hears the horse come and the rider on. They rush past him, and right in the middle of that long paragraph, middle of 416, the horse thundered past and on for an instant in furious silhouette against the stars. The tranquil early summer night sky, which, even before the shape of the horse and rider vanished, strained abruptly and violently upward. What? How can the tranquil early summer night sky strain abruptly and violently upward? How does the sky move upward? What is implied there? Well, it's dark, right? It's like the darkness disappears. Why? You get an old barn that's been around for 100 years, and that wood is seasoned, and it's full of hay, and you like that hay, guess what's going to happen? Whoosh! The darkness disappears and is replaced with light. I think that's what that passage means. I could be wrong. Okay? With a long, swirling roar, incredible and soundless. Well, if it's a roar, I hate that word, how can it be soundless? I think at that moment, what the narrator is telling us is Sardi doesn't hear it, but it does make a roar. It's loud. It's incredible. Why does Sardi not hear it? His adrenaline is pumping and he's running. He's not running towards the barn. He sees that whoosh, and he's going the other direction. And he keeps running, knowing it was too late, yet still running, even after he heard the shot. And an instant later, 2 shots. Okay. Too late for what? Because notice, he knew it was too late. That's after he hears the shot. Too late to save his father? Probably, possibly. 2 more shots? Implication? His father and brother are both dead. What does Sardi not do from that point on? Where doesn't he go? He doesn't go home. In one sense, I could erase this. He's broken free of it, but he hasn't. He's broken free of his father and his brother, but he hasn't broken free of his mother or his sisters. And we're told he keeps running, sometimes stumbling, sometimes tripping. At midnight, he's sitting on the crest of the hill. How long does he run for? Well, let's say he starts running at 8 o'clock towards Major Despain's and then leaving. We're not told if he turns around or if he just keeps running in the same direction. Okay? So he's sitting on the crest of a hill and he can no longer see a glare behind him. Why not? What was the glare? The barn burning. There was no glare behind him now, and he sat now, his back toward what he had called home for 4 days. Why can't he see the glare? Okay, first of all, he's like this. He's sitting up here. The barn was back here somewhere. High ground means you can see farther. You can't even see the glare of the fire. Is it because the barn has burned so quickly? Possibly. Probably not. It's because of how he thinks. His face is to the woods. He's hugging himself because he's cold, because he still has on threadbare clothes. Father, my Father. The grief and despair are now no longer terror and fear, but just grief and despair. Notice that. The grief and despair now no longer terror and fear. No longer means what? The terror and fear of his father being killed? I don't think so. The terror and fear of having to daily deal with his father. That's gone. Now it's just grief and despair. That same grief and despair we saw in that introductory paragraph. Go back to the beginning of the story. And sense just a little of fear, because mostly of despair and grief, the old fierce pull of blood. And he thinks, my father. He was brave. He was. He cried suddenly, but not loud, because it's just a whisper. He was in the war. He was in Colonel Sartor's cavalry. Not knowing, and so the narrator intervenes. The narrator editorializes. Stupid kid. He didn't know how his father actually went to war. He went in that fine old European private sense of to get what he could from the spoils of war. I think I alluded in the other day, final episode of the HBO series Band of Brothers. You've got the American soldiers who go into Berchtesgaden, and then they go up to Hitler's secret hideout. Wasn't secret, but it was a hideout called the Eagle's Nest. And they steal the place entirely. They take his silver, they take his wine. One of the guys takes Hitler's private photo album, which he has until the mid-1950s, when he dies, and then it gets donated to a museum. Okay? That's what they did in, Faulkner is telling us, in the old European sense. He swore no allegiance to any man or side or cause. He just went to war to get what he could out of it. And we've already been told, how did Abner go to war? He didn't go to war for the North or the South. He went to war to steal horses. The sky, the constellations move, time passes, the voice sits there, morning comes. 4:17, last two sentences. He went on down the hill toward the dark woods within which the liquid silver voices of the birds called unceasing. The rapid and urgent beating of the urgent inquiring heart of the late spring night. That is, the song of the birds is like the beating heart of the night. It's choiring, singing like a choir. That sound does what? Because we're told where Sardi goes. He's drawn toward the woods. He did not look back. Meaning, my family, gone. Can he escape them? Fully? No, he can't. Why? Because his parents are still not here in his heart. They're here in his very being. He carries around with him all of those experiences. You know, people often ask, can someone change? You know, TV shows, so a criminal can't change. What does that mean? It means they are bound and determined. Like, literally, they are bound. They can't help themselves. A lot of us say people can change. Does that mean they suddenly, miraculously have, a come to Jesus moment? Maybe, St. Paul, but not usually. They got to fight those demons. Sardi is going to fight those demons. Okay? Now, turn to, since we finished that, turn to, don't know how far we'll get, Flannery O'Connor. That's 9:39. couple things about O'Connor, and I'm going to talk about this grotesque thing in a minute. O'Connor's from Milledgeville, Georgia, where she lives most of her life. She goes off and lives in Iowa for 2 years when she gets her Master's of Arts. She's Catholic. I don't know if you know anything about Catholicism and stuff in the Deep South. To be Catholic in Milledgeville, Georgia, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s was like being a fish out of water. Most other Christians at that time around there, predominantly Southern Baptist and or Church of Christ. And Catholics to Southern Baptist or Church of Christ are heretics. Just by being Catholic, they're burning in hell. They just don't know it yet. They're idolaters. All right? She wrote a response once to a person. I used to have students read this, but I stopped because most of them didn't care. She wrote a response once to a letter writer asking her about her Catholicism. And she said, I write the way I do because I'm Catholic. Which means her Catholicism somehow informs. It gives weight to what she's saying. Okay? So what does that mean? The person was asking, why do you have, I'm going to use this term, images of what's called the grotesque in your stories? Okay? We all know what grotesque means. We may not be able to define it, but you know it when you see it. Okay? In barn burning, who's the grotesque? Who is a grotesque person? Maybe not physical appearance, personality-wise. Abner, he's a pyromaniac. He's a sociopath. Okay? Pretty much all Southern writers use this element. Okay? And they use it to draw attention to some aspect of the society in the story. Usually, more times than not, let me put it that way, like 51% of the time, it's to draw attention to some kind of hypocrisy. Okay? So you have somebody who's odd, out of the ordinary, to see how people respond to that. And how they respond to that generally often shows their hypocrisy. They say they believe one thing, and yet they behave another way. Okay? It's almost always said the grotesque in A Good Man Is Hard to Find is whom? If you've read it, who's the antagonist? The misfit. How do we know he's the grotesque? Because he's a mass murderer. He's escaped from prison. You don't get more grotesque than that. I'm going to throw out another possibility. Is the grandmother grotesque? Okay. One final thing about O'Connor. She contracted lupus early in life. Her father died of lupus. She dies of it when she's 39. Lupus is an autoimmune illness, like AIDS. All right? It's lupus, it's named after wolves. It's thought to be transmitted. It's not. Okay? You don't become a werewolf, in other words. But you get very, very sick from it, and it can last your entire life and eventually kill you, as it did with her. Okay? So, A Good Man Is Hard to Find. What does the title mean? Barn burning. Pretty clear, right? It's about barns burning. Minister's black veil. It's pretty clear. Guy walks in with a black veil one day. A good man is hard to find. You hear that phrase once or twice in the course of the story. That may be the source of the title, but I don't think it is. I think the source of the title is this passage in the Gospel of Matthew. I'm right here, look at me. Come on. Gospel of Matthew, verses 16 and following. I've got the King James Version, but I'm going to just paraphrase. So, Jesus is talking to people, and a rich young man comes up to him and says to him, Good master. It's also in some of the other gospels. I just pulled up Matthew. Good master, what good thing shall I do that I can inherit eternal life? What do I have to do to be saved? In other words. And Jesus says, why'd you call me good? There's none good but God. Why did you call me good? Only God is good. If this guy knew the Old Testament, he would know there is none good. Call no man good. Okay? But if you want to be saved, keep the commandments. And the rich young ruler says, which ones? It's like, Prof, what do I need to do to pass this class? Give me the bare minimum. Which ones? Jesus says, let's see, don't kill, don't sleep with another guy's wife, don't steal, don't lie, honor your parents, and love your neighbor as yourself. Not all of the 10 Commandments, but it's the majority. Done them all. I've already checked off my bucket list for all of those. Okay? What else? What else can I do? Jesus, you want to be perfect? Go sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven. In other words, to be rich, you have to be poor. And come and follow me. Now, in other passages, what does Jesus say it means to come and follow me? You got to take up your cross. You got to deny yourself. Okay? And the guy goes away downhearted. Why? He's loaded. He doesn't want to give away everything. He wants to hold on to it. Okay? Why is this important? Two things. One, dealing with early in with this part of the beginning of that gospel passage that I think links to the end of the story, though we do have the phrase, a good man is hard to find in the story. Good master. Notice Jesus' response again. Why callest thou me good? Only God is good. I think I could be entirely wrong. I think what Jesus is doing there is he's operating kind of via paradox. And he's going, way to go, buddy. You recognize me. You only call God good. You called me good. Because I'm God. Okay? At the end of the story, I'm going to give away part of the ending. At the end of the story, the grandmother has a long talk with the misfit. What does he want to know? Is Jesus really God? Because he says, if I'd been there with Jesus, I'd know. Well, there were lots of people with Jesus at the time. They didn't know, or they didn't believe, which we'll talk about another character, one of the apostles, when we get to the end of the story. So I think that's in the back of her mind partially. So, story opens. We're not told exactly what year. It's published in 1953. It is post-World War II. Anytime after World War II, okay? And we get the setting, they're in Georgia, and they're going to travel to Florida. The grandmother didn't want to go to Florida. She wanted to visit some of her connections in East Tennessee. And she was seizing every chance to change Bailey's mind. Okay? So she wants to go to Tennessee. Family's headed to Florida. Bailey was the son she lived with, her only boy. Bailey's sitting on the edge of his chair. He's reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the sports section. And she's standing there beside him, hand on her hip, thin hip, we're told, shaking the paper over his head. Now, I think that can either mean shaking it literally, like, no offense, over. It could also mean rapping him on the head with it. Bailey, you listen to this. See here, read this. himself the misfit. It's a loose from the federal pen, headed toward Florida. You read here what it says he did to these people. Just you read it. I wouldn't take my children any direction with a criminal like that, loose in it. I couldn't answer my conscience if I did. That is two things. That is both dramatic irony. She says something that has a truth to it that she is totally unaware of. And it's foreshadowing. They are going to run into the misfit. They're going to run into the misfit because of her. Because she won't shut her damn mouth. Okay? And when they do, her conscience, she has none, seemingly. Bailey doesn't look up at her from his reading, so she wheels onto Bailey's wife, the children's mother. Okay? So, in this family, we don't get a last name. You have the grandmother, her son Bailey, his wife, never named, their baby, never named, and their other two children, June Starr and John Wesley. All right? She harangues Bailey. He doesn't respond. She goes and harangues the mother. She doesn't respond. Why not? I think it's implied that she's lived with them all their married life. And she does this kind of thing every frickin' day. What does Bailey learn to do? He ignores it. He drowns her out. Somehow. Okay? She goes on. The children have been to Florida before. You all ought to take them somewhere else for a change so they would see different parts of the world, be broad. Okay. They're in northern Georgia. They're actually in Atlanta when they leave. She wants them to be broad. What does that broad mean? Like well educated. You know, the true blue cord. Bunch of utter nonsense. What's going to make them broad? To go from Atlanta to East Tennessee, like Chattanooga, maybe Knoxville. Ooh, they're going to get such a great experience out of that, right? Why does she want to go, really? It's to see friends and family, her connections. But also, you know, it's for the children. Children's mother didn't seem to hear her. Why? Wah, and she's just learned to ignore it, just like Bailey has. But the children haven't yet. Wonderful, beautiful, well-behaved children. John Wesley. If you don't want to go to Florida, why don't you stay at home? June Starr. She wouldn't stay at home and be queen for a day. The grandmother. Yes, what would you do if this fellow, this misfit, caught you? John Wesley. I'd smack his face. June Starr. She wouldn't stay at home for $1 million. Afraid she missed something. She has to go with us everywhere. Woo! Those two children have just now, to paraphrase Jesus, out of the mouths of babes. They've said some kind of like secret hidden truths. How do they feel about their grandmother? Now, I'll just throw this out there. I wouldn't have wanted my grandmothers, either of them, living with us growing up either. She has to be everywhere they are. They never get a moment's peace from her. Which I think also tells us something about Bailey, which is going to really be brought out towards the end of the story. Describe these children to me. Are these well-disciplined children? Do these children have good manners? Do they show courtesy to their elders? No, they're spoiled brat. I don't mean spoiled in the sense they have everything. They're spoiled in the sense that they've not been properly trained or disciplined. Okay? You don't speak to your if you'd spoken this way to one of your, assuming your grandmothers were somehow in your lives, if you'd spoken this way to one of your grandmothers, what would she do? Or what would they do? I probably wouldn't have sat for a week. possibly would have had a palm print on the side of my face for a week. They never, either the small, frailish one or the one that was, built like a truck, would not have taken that at all. Okay? That day ends. The next morning, who's the first one in the car who doesn't want to go to Florida? The grandmother. Why is she the first one in the car? She's just itching to go now? No, she wants to get in the car before everybody else because she's bringing something she knows she shouldn't bring. She has her cat with her. Pity Singh. Why? She doesn't want to leave the cat at the house because she's afraid the cat might brush up against the knob on the stove, turn the gas on, and die. Or burn the house down. Okay. Cats are smart. They're not that smart. So, she gets in. We're given a long description of how she's dressed. And we're told the last of that full paragraph on the bottom of page 362, very last sentence, in case of an accident, anyone seeing her dead on the highway would know at once she was a lady. Foreshadowing. What does she think makes her a lady in the eyes of other people? Is it her behavior? No, because they won't be able to see any behavior when there's just a body lying on the ground. It's how she appears. And how does she appear? She's got on her Sunday best. She even has the white gloves that were common in the 50s. Collars and cuffs and everything. So, they get in the car. She cautions Bailey, speed limit's 55, etc. And they make their way. They go past Stone Mountain. John Wesley. We go through Georgia as fast as we can so we don't have to look at it. Grandmother. If I were a little boy, I wouldn't talk about my native state that way. Tennessee has mountains. Georgia has hills. What does John Wesley say about both states? They suck, man. Are we told how old John Wesley is? No, he's just referred to as a little boy. What kind of attitude does he have for a little boy? Term is jaded. He's got a pretty bleak outlook on life. Okay? June Star says, you said it. Now listen to the grandmother and listen to what she says in connection with what we're immediately told. This little scene, this little vignette. In my time, meaning what? When I was young, in the golden age, in the old days, when everything was better. Why? Because the present always sucks, and everything always looks better from a distance. So, in my time, children were more respectful of their native states and their parents and everything else. And everything else, I think she means me, grandparents. People did right then. People knew how to behave then. Oh, look at the cute little pickaninny. And they see a little black, I think it's a boy, or is it just child? They see a little black child standing in the back door of a house off in the distance, naked from the waist down. Okay, remember how the paragraph began. In my time, people were respectful, life was good, etc., etc. And then she sees the child. Wouldn't that make a picture now? They all look. June Star, he didn't have any breeches on. Grandmother probably didn't have any. Little black kids in the country don't have things like we do. If I could paint, I'd paint a picture of that. Why? Why would you paint a picture of a little kid who's half naked? How's the passage begin? In the good old days. I think O'Connor is having the grandmother express, in the good old days, this is what life looked like. Not for me, but for blacks. What is the only way we can describe the grandmother? the term probably would not have been used then at all. She's racist. She's racist in every fiber of her being. Okay? She'd want to permanentize, make permanent that image, because it makes her think of the good old days. Now, she's not old enough to have lived before the Civil War. We don't think. Doesn't sound like she's in her 90s or 100s. 50s, 60s maybe. But if it's 60s, and this is, say, 48, then that means she was born back in 1888, and she grew up during Jim Crow South and all of that. So, they keep driving. They go past the cotton field. In that cotton field are 5 or 6 graves. Notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in the family. It's foreshadowing again. Okay? And she mentions the plantation and that's the family burying ground. John Wesley says, "Where's the plantation?" And the grandmother says, "Gone with the wind." Like all those great things of the great and glorious South. Now, when I first met my wife's family, obviously my last name's Sherman. When I first met my wife's family, who were all from southern Georgia, like 5-10 miles north of the Florida border. You know, one thing she said was, "Don't tell anybody who you're related to." General Sherman's like a second cousin from me. Burned the South. Okay? All of her family, except for one of the women who married one of her uncles, are from the South and fought for the South in the Civil War. This one woman, she was related to Grant. So she and I have a special connection because we were both called outlaws because we weren't in-laws because of our connection with the North. So where's the plantation? Gone with the wind, like all the great things from the South, you know. So the grandmother starts to tell him a story about a man she dated, etc., etc. Time goes on. It's time for them to eat lunch. They stop at Red Sammy's barbecue. Red Sammy's under a car fixing it. They go inside. They order. Red Sammy's wife serves them. Red Sammy comes in. Red Sam's wife addresses June Star and says, "Ain't she cute?" And June Star mouths off to her. And then Red Sam's wife says again, "Ain't she cute?" The first time she means it. The second time she's saying, "What a little bitch. How dare you speak to me like that?" Okay? Red Sam comes in, wipes his face off and says, "You know, 2 fellers came in here last week. They look like decent men, had a good car. I let them charge their gas." Why'd I do that? Between I let them charge the gas, why'd I do that? What's implied? They didn't come back and pay. Because when he says I let them charge, he's not talking credit card. He let them fill their tank on the basis of how they looked. Why'd you do that? Grandmother, because you're a good man. Sam, yes'm, I suppose so. And his wife then comes in with their food and starts serving them and says, "It isn't a soul in this green world of God's that you can trust." And then she looks directly at her husband. And I don't count nobody out of that, not nobody. The grandmother's just told Red Sam, "You're a good man." What does his wife say? "I don't trust him." Right? I mean, you should be able to trust in quote unquote good men. So they start talking about the misfit. And Red Sam says, top of 365, about 4 paragraphs down, "A good man is hard to find." But the grandmother called him a good man. Everything is getting terrible. I remember the day you could go off and leave your screen door unlatched. What does he mean, go off and leave your screen door unlatched? He means to leave the hard door, the solid door, wide open, just the screen door pulled to, and you could go off to work or to shop. Now, deep south, right? No air conditioning. You want to leave those doors open. Why? So that during the heat of the day, if there's a breeze, it keeps the house a little bit cooler than it is outside. And they go on, and I'm going to stop with this. They go on and they start to talk about all the problems in the world, and they blame it on whom? Europe. It's all because of Europe. Things haven't changed much, have they? Okay. We'll talk about that we'll finish this on Friday. Go ahead and read the intro to drama and stuff. There's a quiz, I think it goes live tonight, I didn't tell my first class this, over some of the fiction terms, Hawthorne and Faulkner, okay? It's due Friday or Saturday night, I can't remember. You got 2 or 3 days to do it, okay? Then I'll make the O'Connor quiz go, and then the exam will be due next week. All right, have a good day.